and it's a real shame.
What do you think, Joe? I mean, since she landed a retail job in Taranaki after this article and stuff appeared, if you were a small business owner, would you have concerns about someone you hire having facial tattoos?
Yes, I think I would, because a lot of people evince the attitude that Cindy used to hold, and which I generally hold myself. That there's something slightly there's something abnormal and a little confronting about some tattoos, and all facial tattoos are slightly unnerving. And if you've got someone who's working in your shop, you don't want to unnerve customers. For rightly or wrongly, you don't want to do that. So I fully endorse her right to have a tattoo, but I think it also can be taken into account when people are hiring her. Yeah.
Do employers have the right to do this? To reject someone on the basis of having?
Well, no, they don't.
Yeah.
And these, Joe, these particular tattoos are up, by the cheekbone and by the hairline, and they're really, really pretty. I would agree if it was a very confronting full facial tattoo, which could be scary, but this could not be deemed scary at all.
Quite well designed, aren't they?
They're beautifully designed.
What general reaction do you both have? I mean, you've mentioned yours, Cindy, you've grown to love them. What about you, Joe? I mean, are you a tattoo person? Do you have
Grown to love them, maybe a slight exaggeration. Yeah. I would have to think about how I felt if my 21-year-old came home with a facial tattoo, but I'm accepting and admiring.
Yeah, what about you, Joe? I mean,
I'm no fan of tattoos. I've never been pleased by one. I don't find most of them offensive. I think some get very sad in later life. And when I was about between 17 and 25, I considered getting a few unobtrusive tattoos. I'm extraordinarily grateful that I didn't. And I know plenty of people who've had them removed in later life, also because body shape changes. And so tattoos that may have been attractive at one stage can become awful, saggy things.
Lots of texts about Santa and the parade. Take Joe to the parade, Wallace. Give him a good time. You tell me when you next come up, and I'll take you to the parade. How about that? Is that a date?
That'll be lovely. We'll hold hands and smoke together. Yeah.
Not in front of the children.
Yes, exactly. Now, just finally, look, as neighbours at war in East Auckland, would you put road cones on a street to protect the car space that you like? A person illegally put out cones to block access to public parking down their street yesterday. This is in Auckland's Bucklands Beach. The neighbour first put an orange road cone to block out the park, but the neighbours came along and replaced it with a set of toy cones. So, as expected, this turned out into a heated argument, of course. The power of the road cone, Joe, is quite something, isn't it? I just see one and I obey it.
They became absolute fixtures, and they still are in Christchurch after the earthquake. God knows where they'd all been beforehand, but suddenly they were everywhere. These great orange witches' hats, and they got decorated after the earthquakes with flowers quite a lot. Because they were so authoritarian that people softened them with putting flowers in their little holes in the top.
So would you do that to protect the space in your street when you put out a cone? Yes or no?
Everyone would be tempted to do it, but obviously you shouldn't.
Cindy?
I'd like to, because I'd like to park, but you can't. You don't have the right to do that.
Yeah. You both have been absolutely delightful this afternoon. Joe, Bennett, Cindy Minchinner, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for the invite.
Thank you so much for listening and your texts, and see you tomorrow.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, the NZTA strips a Northland garage of the right to issue warrants. Dargaville diesel specialist gave one car a waff. A month later, its frayed seatbelt failed in a serious crash. The passenger subsequently died. So who failed the dead man? The garage who issued the warrant, or NZTA, who knew for years that the garage wasn't up to scratch? A co-worker of the bogus psychiatrist in the UK says the pretend doctor, who claimed to have trained in New Zealand, was checking treatments online and reading other consultants' notes. And the whale with a belly full of plastic cups, that is, more than 100 of them. All those stories and more. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. The man accused of murdering a Manurewa woman has told a jury that he held her as she lay dying, but that he did not murder her. Arishma Chand was found stabbed to death in her Manurewa home last November. Her former boyfriend Rohit Deepak Singh is on trial in the High Court in Auckland, where he has pleaded not guilty to her murder. Mr Singh, who took the stand today, told the jury he was secretly seeing the 24-year-old when she was killed. Speaking through an interpreter, he said they had agreed to spend the night together, but when he arrived at her house, she was fatally injured. He said he tried to help her, but she told him to leave the house so that her parents wouldn't see him. A lawyer specialising in drink driving charges is cautioning against the idea of permanently banning repeat offenders. A recidivist drink driver, Gavin Hawthorne, was sentenced yesterday to 6 months home detention and 180 hours community work and was disqualified from driving for 2 years. Hawthorne has already spent more than 10 years in prison for killing 4 people while driving drunk. The road safety lobby group Break says drivers like that should be banned for life, but lawyer Steve Cullen says that shouldn't be rushed into.
You wouldn't want that type of approach applied to somebody who's in their 20s or 30s and in their 60s or 70s. That type of punishment is still applying with no prospect of appeal. It would probably be a breach of the Bill of Rights Act and a breach of rules of natural justice.
Steve Cullen says a permanent ban could be considered for the most extreme offenders. 2 more companies have pulled out of next year's Auckland Pride Parade because of the ban on uniformed police taking part. Vodafone withdrew its funding today, saying it won't join the parade unless the Pride Board changes its mind about the ban. The chair of Vodafone's Rainbow Whānau, Darren Mendoza, says they can't take part in an event that applies different rules to different groups.
Ultimately, we believe that we should walk the value of inclusion, in which case, in this case, it's not walking at all if the police were not allowed to wear uniforms at the parade.
Darren Mendoza. BNZ has also withdrawn its support following Westpac, the Ponsonby Business Association and the Rainbow New Zealand Trust. Residents along the Clutha River are remaining on alert even as the water recedes. The river has dropped since threatening some homes in Belclutha after yesterday's torrential rain, but more rain is forecast and water is being released from the Roxburgh Dam further back along the catchment. Steve Selwood says he will spend tonight at a neighbour's house.
We've got our truck packed up and everything that's parked up the road here, so we're just out the back door and over the picnic table and up to the neighbour's place. And that's it.
Steve Selwood says he spent a sleepless night monitoring the river, which is separated from his front yard by just a flood bank. People are believed to be trapped in a camper van that has crashed down a bank in the Buller Gorge near Westport. Emergency services have just arrived at the scene at Hawkes Crag on the lower Buller Gorge Road. The fire service says people are believed to be injured and trapped inside the vehicle. A helicopter is on its way from Greymouth and an ambulance has been sent from Westport. Pharmacists have been told to restrict the number of paracetamol tablets they give out because of a national shortage of the country's most dispensed medicine. Stocks are running low and new supplies aren't expected until the new year. Pharmax Director of Operations Lisa Williams says the shortage is due to issues of overseas manufacturing plants.
One of the manufacturers of the active pharmaceutical ingredient in the world had a fire which caused a problem at their factory with the production of the product. So that means that all finished product manufacturers of paracetamol have been finding difficulties getting access to the active ingredient.
Lisa Williams, the restriction applies only to paracetamol bought on prescription. It's 5:04. Conservationists have expressed horror at the discovery of a dead sperm whale with almost 6 kilograms of plastic waste in its stomach. The carcass washed ashore in a national park off the coast of Sulawesi in Indonesia. Inside the whale's stomach were 115 plastic drinking cups, 4 plastic bottles, 25 plastic bags and 2 jandals. WWF's Director of Science, Mark Wright, says it's stark evidence of the effect of plastic pollution on ocean creatures.
This was an absolutely unnatural death and an absolutely unnecessary death, but we see it in virtually every type of animal or creature that lives in the ocean, ingests plastics and suffers as a result. We can estimate that every year something like 8 to 10 million tonnes of plastic enter the oceans, and there's no sign of that abating.
Mark Wright of WWF. It's 5:05.
To sport, and Steve Hansen says because Australia are underperforming, South Africa are the only Southern Hemisphere country giving the All Blacks the top flight opposition they need. The All Blacks coach concedes their big Bledisloe Cup wins this year came against a team who are not quite right and not on the same level as South Africa, England and Ireland. New Zealand recorded a loss and a narrow win over the Springboks in the Rugby Championship, followed by a 1-point win over England and the weekend's 16-9 loss to Ireland. Hansen says there was a noticeable step up required against the Springboks this year, and while he still thinks Australia are a good side, there is something missing. The All Blacks' final test of the season is against Italy in Rome on Sunday morning. The New Zealand under-17 football team have set up a quarter-final clash with Japan at the World Cup in Uruguay. They finished second in their group after losing 2-0 in Ghana today. Coach Leon Burney concedes it's a tough assignment against the top side in Asia.
Japan are a quality side, so it doesn't get any easier. But what I've learned about this group is when we get to that game, they'll give everything they've got. And after that game, that's when we'll know if it's enough. So we've got 3-4 days now to prepare. And what I will say is we've defied the odds already in this tournament and we're looking to do it again.
New Zealand's under-17 football coach Leon Burney. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, James Nokise chews the fried chicken in the shower with fellow comedian Josh Thompson. We have a window on the world of American politics from Truman to Trump, and historians Buddy McCarty and Cliff Simmons bring Māori and Pākehā perspective to the Battle of Gate Pa, the most significant Māori victory of the 1860s land wars, on Nights from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Showers, heavy and thundery with hail clearing most places tomorrow. However, the odd afternoon and evening shower remaining south of Auckland. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers especially about the ranges with possible thunderstorms and hail. Taranaki to Wellington including Wairarapa, showers and isolated thunderstorms. Heavy with possible hail especially about the ranges. Clearing everywhere tomorrow apart from Wellington and Wairarapa. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Northern Westland. A few showers inland, some heavy with thundery hail today, otherwise fine. The odd shower developing about Marlborough tomorrow. For the remainder of Westland and Fiordland, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges, otherwise fine. Canterbury, occasional showers mainly south of Christchurch. Otago and Southland, rain with some heavy falls today, gradually clearing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, showers today, fine spells tomorrow. It's 7 minutes, or coming up to 8 minutes past 5. You're with Checkpoint.
And I'm Lisa Owen. We'll bring you the latest from Sora and Otago shortly, but we begin tonight in Northland, where a garage owner, stripped of his warrant of fitness licence after a fatal car crash, says the warrant of fitness system needs a complete overhaul. Dargaville Diesel Specialists owner Rodney Wilson lost his licence after NZTA claimed he issued a warrant of fitness to a car last December without properly inspecting the seat belts. Passenger William Ball died in hospital following a car crash in that vehicle in January when NZTA says his frayed seatbelt failed. But Mr Wilson, who says he's been a mechanic for 50 years, disputes this. He says an incident like this has never happened before and he personally inspected the seatbelt. In a moment we'll hear from NZTA, but a short time ago I spoke to Mr Wilson and asked him how the accident happened. If you're listening, Mr Wilson uses some colourful language.
I have no idea, other than the seatbelt cut on the buckle.
You mean it broke? The seatbelt broke during the crash?
Yeah.
And the passenger that was restrained by that seatbelt, what happened?
He went to hospital, and while in hospital he contracted a fairly serious bacterial infection, which killed him. And so
he'd been thrown through the windscreen by not wearing, by the seatbelt breaking.
Through the windscreen. He wasn't thrown through the windscreen.
He wasn't?
He hit the windscreen.
Okay.
But he wasn't thrown through the windscreen.
So the issue was obviously around the seatbelt. What checks do you remember doing on the car and the seatbelts?
At the time I spoke to him about it, I couldn't remember, but I thought long and hard about it, and there's no way I would have issued a warrant to a car with seatbelts in the condition that those were in.
So what do you think happened?
Well, who knows? People change parts on cars all the time. Come and get a warrant and then go change the old shit back on again.
So what amount of time passed between you issuing the warrant and the accident happening? Can you remember roughly?
No, I've no idea. And I've got no records or anything because they came and took all the records away.
Right, so you don't have any of that information in front of you.
No.
Have you had any problems with this kind of thing before?
No.
Okay, so you issued a warrant. You told us that you believe the seatbelts were in proper order at the time you issued the warrant. We don't know.
They must have been, or I wouldn't have passed the warrant.
Okay, we don't know exactly how much time has passed between then and the crash, but whose responsibility is it to, well, make sure the vehicle is in roadworthy condition between warrants?
It's the car owner's responsibility.
So if it's okay at the time you issue the warrant, you think that, what, if a month has passed and there's a failure of some part, you're not responsible for that?
It says on the back of the warrant sheet that a warrant of fitness only represents that the car is fit to be issued a warrant on the day of inspection. After that, who knows?
When did this investigation start? When did you become aware of it?
Just after Christmas.
Right, so the accident was in January, as I understand it. Is that right?
Yep. Well, just after that, they started the investigation.
So how do you feel you've been treated in all of this?
Very unfairly.
And why is that, Rodney?
I haven't had a chance to say anything other than, you know, they come and they go, and they come and they go, and they don't. The biggest problem is they do everything they can to upset you, and then when they get upset, they say, oh, you've got a problem with the system.
Who are you talking about specifically there,
I'm talking about the
NZTA?
New Zealand Transport Agency.
Right. Okay, so you've been how long in the business, and what would you say about your track record?
I have been in this trade for 50 years. And I've owned this business for probably just over 15 years, about 15 and a half years, and I've never had a problem until now.
Because obviously you'll be aware the New Zealand Transport Agency says that your shop issued a warrant to an unsafe car which was subsequently involved in a fatal crash, and they say that is totally unacceptable. How do you feel about that?
I feel really bad about it, but the crash wasn't a fatal crash. The man did not die of the injuries from the accident.
That's Rodney Wilson, the owner of Dargaville Diesel Specialists. Now, he went on to tell me that he was unsure whether he'd face charges, but he said he'd been interviewed by police. He told me the situation had taken a real toll on his health.
I've ended up in hospital from stomach ulcers caused by the stress of all this shit. Almost died, had to have blood transfusions, and I'm still not right. I went for a scan yesterday to check up on a few other bits and pieces, and I won't know for 2 days whether that's right. I was a picture of health before this shit happened.
What would you like to say to NZTA?
What would I like to say? Go f*** themselves.
What options do you have?
I think they should be investigating their own backyard right from the top down, because the whole system is f***ed up.
And what options do you have now?
How do you mean, what options?
Well, can you appeal this? Is there anything you can do?
I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to sell up and retire. I just think that the whole system needs looking at, and the part that gets me is where you can override a VIN number and you can change things so that it goes through, and you shouldn't be able to change anything. If a VIN number is not right, the vehicle shouldn't be able to get a warrant, and it should be up to the drivers. Those 12-month warrant of fitness, had people coming in here after 12 months and the wires hanging out of their tyres. And then when you say, oh, your tyres are buggered, oh, are they? Well, they don't even look at them.
Do you think there's too much time in between warrants? Too much can happen with car parts and...
Far too much time, even for new cars, because tyres and brakes are the two things that seriously cause problems. And if your tyres are buggered, you're going to crash.
That is Dargaville Diesel Specialists owner Rodney Wilson, and listening to that is the NZTA's Chief Executive Fergus Gammy, and he joins me now live. Mr Gammy, you have said, NZTA has said that the Dargaville garage failed William Ball, who was the man who died in the accident. But reading all the facts, I'm just wondering, is NZTA as much to blame for his death as well?
So Lisa, firstly, listening to Mr Wilson there, I'm very disappointed in his comments, and I just want to quickly, publicly again express my condolences to the family of Mr Ball. I've visited the family and apologise for the transport agency's part in this sad event. The family should be able to rely on the inspection of the vehicle that their brother had been travelling in. Dargaville Diesel was responsible for that. They did not check the vehicle properly. They did fail. We do have clear evidence that their inspection process is not adequate, and for that reason we suspended their ability to issue warrants.
But there are catastrophic failures in NZTA's system as well, aren't there? So how long did you know this garage wasn't up to scratch?
So this, firstly I want to say, and I have said, that yes, we need to do better there, and the transport agency should have done better. This was not good practice, and for this reason we've actually initiated a complete change in the way we're doing regulation, and we brought in Meredith Connell to
Okay, we'll get to that shortly. We'll get to that shortly, Mr Gammy, but I'd appreciate it if you could address the question at hand. How long have you known that this garage was not up to scratch?
So this Dargaville Diesel has been issuing warrants since 2010. Over that time, the transport agency has inspected them or made education visits around 15 times and sought to work with them, which is an approach which was too much focused on education. In 2017, we became aware that there were specific issues being identified, and we did visit them in November, the end of the year, in an unscheduled visit. And in that visit, we identified that actually they weren't issuing warrants correctly, that there were things that they weren't doing, such as our people did observe them issuing a warrant without checking the seatbelts. So that was when we became clearly aware.
Okay, that's not the full story. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mr Gammy, but that's not the full story. Based on your own statement, from 2011, NZTA found problems with compliance at this garage. The most serious incident, as you have identified there, was that you turned up on the premises and found that they weren't properly inspecting vehicles or including seatbelts. But you've known there's a problem with this since 2011. Why didn't you do anything sooner?
Lisa, that's exactly what I did say, that we have known for that long. We should have done something much earlier, and it is an approach to regulation which has not been adequate or satisfactory. And so for that reason, we've actually changed our approach. We spent too much time trying to work with Dargaville Diesel instead of actually acting to stop them doing it.
So why didn't you do anything sooner?
Well, as we've said in our media release, and as we said on the 15th of October, we had an approach to regulation which was focused on education, working with people, trying to help them come up to the standard. And we're not taking a tough enough approach to enforcement. That is the reason, that is what we are now doing. So if this came to our attention now, we would act immediately to suspend their ability to issue warrants.
How many other lives do you think may be at risk because of inadequate action by NZTA in respect of garages who are acting poorly?
So Lisa, on the 15th of October we identified that we had 850 files that we were working through with 159 high priority ones. We've we've progressed through those. We're looking to report our progress next week on that. But essentially, as we go through these files, we're identifying where there are specific actions that need to be taken.
But that's outside of Dargaville Diesel.
Action.
That's outside of Dargaville Diesel Specialists. That's the whole picture, isn't it? You're talking about. Right. So Dargaville Diesel Specialists. How many vehicles do you think need to be revisited?
Oh, in terms of Dargaville Diesel, Lisa? So with Dargaville Diesel, after we suspended them, we identified there were 1,956, so 1,956 vehicles which had warrants issued in the previous 12 months. So we wrote to all of the owners of all of those vehicles and identified to them the issue, strongly recommend that they get those vehicles retested, provided them with a voucher to do that. We've followed up with them as well. We've called them from our call centre. And we'll be continuing to recommend that they get their vehicles retested.
Okay, so Rodney Wilson has been punished for his part in this. He's lost his ability to give warranted fitnesses. What about NZTA? What about the workers that dealt with this? What punishment are they receiving? Are they all still employed? Has anyone lost their job?
So Lisa, what we have done is, and as you know from our media release, we've engaged the QC to go through this in detail and to assess exactly what happened, how did it happen, and around accountability. So we're going through that process, and we'll see where we get to at the end of that. As we said, we'll make that report public. So we need to follow.
So you're not ruling out people losing their jobs? You're not ruling that out?
I'm not ruling anything out or ruling anything in. What I'm saying to you is we've engaged the QC so we can go to it in full detail, and we will once we get that report, then we'll consider that.
All right, thank you for joining us this evening. That is Fergus Gammy, who's the Chief Executive of NZTA. As he mentioned there, they knew since 2011 that there were problems with that garage in Dargaville. While heavy rain has pushed the Clutha River to its highest level in almost 2 decades, yet it could have been so much worse as flood banks held and homes stayed dry. But on the Taieri Plains, farmers weren't so lucky. The Taieri and Waipori rivers have spewed onto farmland, inundating paddocks, while dairy cows are at the height of the milking season, and water still surrounds the settlement of Henley. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has been out in the region surveying the damage.
Last night was a sleepless one for Steve Selwood. He was among a handful of Balclutha residents who were advised to leave their homes as the Clutha River rose to its highest level since 1999. But despite the recommendation to evacuate, he held firm, and so did the river banks.
The water was flowing over here a wee bit from here and coming up through, I think it's a drain thing in the road there, and it was shooting up about 2 inches then, but hey, it never got any higher, so it was still draining out into the river. So yeah, we just stayed with it.
Nothing going to move you?
Yeah, pirate always sticks with the ship. Yeah.
But Mr. Selwood won't be staying in his home tonight, as he's worried about the river continuing to rise with more rain forecast and water being released from the Roxburgh Dam further up the Clutha.
We've got our truck packed up and everything that's parked up the road here, so we're just out the back door and over the picnic table and up to the neighbour's place. And that's it.
Across the town at the South Otago Aero Club, 2 planes had to be evacuated from the hangar as the floodwaters turned the property into a space resembling an aquatic centre more than an airport. Chief Flying Instructor Don Cameron says the wind added to their trouble.
We don't have any floats on our float planes, so we can't operate. So we've still got aeroplanes stuck in the hangar. We had to put them up on pallets because there was so much wind yesterday. I've never seen anything like it. About probably 50 knots of wind down here, and it was unsafe to get them out and leave them outside.
Don Cameron says dealing with floods at Balclutha Airport has become a regular occurrence.
This is just one of our many floods we've had over the years, although it's been probably 98 or 99 around about then since we had our last flood, so we've been pretty lucky up till now.
And Clutha District Mayor Brian Cadogan says despite the sleepless night, it could have been much worse. He still remembers the 1999 flood.
While this is the most we've seen since that time, that was a bigger flood. We're running at 2,700 QMax, maybe just a wee bit over at the moment. It was up around the 4,000, so that was a biggie the last time. This one, the two features have been the speed that it's come up and the fact that the Pomahaka catchments contributed so much to it.
And the effects of the flooding have been widely felt. Roads throughout the Clutha district are washed out, as are paddocks along the major rivers' banks. But Mr Cadogan says the water levels are easing.
We're feeling that we've got quite a few hours where we can get this inundation away, and we're confident that matters are under control.
But out on the Taieri, where the settlement of Henley remains cut off as water inundates the roads, it will take days for the water to clear. Dairy farmer Gavin Russell says more than 100 hectares of his farm is underwater at the moment.
It's been building up though, so it's been pretty wet here, and all the ditches have been pretty full since the start of November. So yesterday's 80 mils of rain has actually just filled everything right up, and it's now at stage it's been flooding.
Another Taieri dairy farmer who didn't want to be named says he was moving fresh hay bales when the Taieri River started flooding through a spillway and into farmland. He managed to save his 270 bales, but his neighbour wasn't so lucky.
We saw that he was away, and with a group of us that were all local farmers, we decided to help him out, and we tried to shift his baleage up to higher ground. We didn't know we couldn't cart it out, we didn't have enough time. He had 500 bales stacked up in the paddocks that he had made all through the night the other week. In the gap that was 2 days, he made. They worked till 3 o'clock in the morning to get those bales made, and now they're all floating down the river.
It's been a tough couple of years for farmers on the Taieri Plains. It flooded last July, then they had to deal with a drought, and now another flood during the height of milking season. Like all the residents in coastal Otago, they have one eye on the sky to see what will come in the following days. In Otago, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
And we will give you an update on the weather down south a little bit later in the show. A co-worker of the bogus psychiatrist Zolia Alimi says the pretend doctor had to be stopped from giving a teenager electric shock treatment. Alimi worked more than 2 decades in the UK despite having 0 doctor's qualifications after dropping out in her first year of medical school at Auckland University. Claire Wilkinson worked as Zolia Alimi's secretary at a private health clinic in Plymouth in 2014 and 2015. And she says she wasn't surprised at all to learn that she was a fake.
When you say she didn't act like a consultant, what kind of things did you notice?
She was going to give a young girl electric shock therapy. And I just said to her, well, why would you do that? We've never given anyone electric shock therapy. And she said, well, nothing else seems to be working. Medication isn't working. I said, yes. The only problem with that young girl is she wants to be independent and live by herself. She worked perfectly fine when she did that. And her answer was, oh, all right, then that's good. You don't have to do that then. But it was like, it was normal for her to say to give a young girl electric shock therapy because she's not happy at home.
Had she given other patients that treatment, do you know, Claire?
No, she hadn't.
So how did she go about prescribing drugs? Because she would have had no experience.
She'd get me to write the prescriptions out, then she would allegedly check and sign them. She wouldn't write them herself.
Did she tell you or advise you what drugs to put down?
Yeah.
How do you think she got that information with no training?
I think she got it off other people's notes. She was very intelligent, very clever. So and she did remember things. But I think she just picked things up off other people. Like she'd always go to the other consultant and say, I'm going to do this, what do you think? She always needed validation.
What concerns do you have about the patients that she cared for, may have prescribed drugs for or treatment, about their ongoing health?
There's only the young girl that I was really concerned about. All the others, because we were community based, we weren't an inpatient unit. they were obviously safe to be in the community, and they had carers with them. And if anyone had a query, then they would come back and query it. So we were lucky, whereas, these people did have care and support staff with them and family if there was any queries. Whereas if they were just, mental health patients, then they might not have had the support.
But But presumably they missed out on real treatment that could have improved their lives.
Yes. She was only a sticking plaster for us. You had to tread very careful with her because she was easily upset. If I was off sick for any length of time, she would just cry. And now I'm thinking, is that because she couldn't do a job properly without me? Or, I don't know. But yeah, her behaviour was strange.
Claire, when you say that she seemed to look to other consultants and other people for validation, how did she seem in her work? Did she seem nervous with patients or unable to make decisions? Or how would you describe the way she behaved?
She came across very confident in her decisions. She wouldn't be swayed. If she thought something and she was rigid on it, that was it. You couldn't change her mind. Whereas when she wasn't confident and she'd go to the other consultant for advice, she'd be quite nervous. I don't know if it's because she didn't like asking for help or she thought what she was thinking of doing was wrong.
Do you think she might have been concerned she was going to be found out?
I think that was a lot of it now, looking back at it, because she would cry a lot and she always wanted to try and please people. Now looks like a guilty person.
How do you think?
I think she believed she was a consultant.
What makes you say that?
I think she believed her own rubbish. Because the confidence, I suppose that might be part of the trickery, but the confidence in her, when she was confident, was totally believable. But I knew there was something not right.
Did anyone ever bring up concerns about her, or did you ever talk to anyone else about your concerns?
Yep, I did. I spoke to virtually anyone who'd listen. I spoke to my line manager, and she said, just keep me informed. And I spoke to the head of service, and he said, I don't know what to say. So I was kind of left holding this baby, literally, not knowing what to do or where to go. There was another community nurse who had the same concerns because she knew her from before and a different placement, and she was raising her concerns the same as I was, but nobody was taking it seriously. I think they were thinking, well, a psychiatrist or a doctor is better than no doctor.
And what concerns were you raising specifically?
Her behaviour. It was strange.
This case has obviously shocked and surprised a number of people, and they wonder how could she have got away with it. If you were to describe Zolia Alimi to people, how would you sum her up in a couple of sentences?
Mad as a box of frogs. Absolutely nuts. Her heart's in the right place, I believe, but she gets things so wrong. I don't know how she can get it so wrong.
Do you think she might have been looking up books or looking on the internet for how to do things?
Yeah. Yeah, she was always on the internet.
Did you think that was suspicious at the time?
No, because the internet is like an up-to-date encyclopedia, isn't it? Everyone uses it. So I didn't think anything of it. She could be looking for new treatments, she could be looking for new medication, could be anything. I just thought that was normal.
And that is Claire Wilkinson, who worked with Zolia Alimi, the bogus psychiatrist in the UK, who was also apparently obsessed with lavish gestures, once bought a staff member diamonds for Christmas and bought others, tens of others, boxes of champagne for Christmas too. She's currently in jail for defrauding a dementia patient. And coming up, should recidivist drink drivers have their licences revoked permanently? Middlemore Hospital's leaky, rotting buildings get an $80 million facelift, a nationwide shortage of paracetamol, and a dead sperm whale washes up with more than 6 kilograms of plastic in its stomach. We would love your feedback, so don't forget you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at checkpointrnz, and you can email us at checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's the headlines.
The Transport Agency says it's totally unacceptable that a Northland mechanic gave a warrant of fitness to an unsafe car, which was later involved in a fatal crash. 65-year-old William Ball was killed in January when the car he was passenger in crashed into a ditch near Dargaville. An investigation found the front passenger seatbelt was frayed and failed in the crash. The man accused of murdering a Manurewa woman has told a jury he and Arishma Chand were secretly seeing each other when she was killed. Rohit Deepak Singh has pleaded not guilty to murdering Arishma Chand and took the stand at the High Court in Auckland today. Speaking through an interpreter, Mr Singh said he and Ms Chand had agreed to spend the night together, but she was already fatally injured when he arrived at her house. A lawyer is warning against permanently disqualifying repeat drink drivers except for the most extreme offenders. A recidivist drunk driver who has already been jailed for more than 10 years for killing 4 people while driving drunk was yesterday sentenced to 6 months home detention and 180 hours community work and disqualified from driving for 2 years. The road safety lobby group BRAKE says such drivers should be banned for life. But lawyer Steve Cullen says this could breach natural justice for people in their 20s and 30s. Another bank and 2 more companies have pulled out of the 2019 Auckland Pride Parade because of the ban on uniformed police taking part. ANZ Bank joins the BNZ and Westpac in pulling support. Vodafone has also withdrawn funding, saying they can't take part in an event that applies different rules to different groups. It follows decisions to pull out by the Ponsonby Business Association and the Rainbow New Zealand Trust. People living along the Clutha River on alert despite the water receding. Water levels have now dropped since threatening homes in Balclutha after yesterday's torrential rain, but more rain is forecast and water is being released from the Roxburgh Dam further back along the catchment. Turning to business news now with Nona Peltier.
Thank you. And Nona is in the studio. Someone's trying to get their mitts on Trade Me. What's going on?
Well, yes, I mean, Trade Me is a public listed company, so the shares are available for anyone to buy, and a company out of London and New York, so it's a private equity firm. It's called Apex. It's made a takeover proposal, so it's not actually gone through with an offer yet. They wanted to have a look at the books, so Trade Me said, sure, we'll have a look, because they are indicative offer is $6.40 a share, which is a 25% premium to the last traded price. That was the day before. That was yesterday at $5.10. So that's a big tick up. If you're a shareholder, that could be quite a hefty lift in your value.
So what do we know about Apex?
Well, not a lot, except that they, they're a private equity firm. They invest in companies like Trade Me around the world. I spoke to an analyst who suggested it's not a bad fit for them. I mean, with Europe, the way things are with Brexit and so forth, could be a nice defensive move to diversify your portfolio. Trade Me is a cash-rich company. It trades reasonably well. Its share price hasn't moved a lot recently, so this is quite out of the blue, and we'll see what happens. They've got 3 weeks to look at the books and make up their mind. The board is working with them and cooperating, but no one's making any further comment about it.
Okay. Another company, a media company too, NZME, and people will recognise the name. It's the Herald brand, and they've got some other radio brands under that umbrella.
Yeah, that's right, they do.
Yeah. So they are predicting a 20% plus drop in annual underlying profit.
Yeah.
What is going on there?
Well, it's advertising revenue, and that's not good news for anybody in the industry. The advertising revenue has been They expected it to fall, and it did. So that's disappointing for the company. They said that the fourth quarter, so they have a year-end December 31. They said that the fourth quarter, which is the one we're in now, advertising revenues seem to have picked up a bit more than they were in the third quarter, but that was down 4%. And so on what they were, they were expecting that to be down, but it's still not good news. And the market reacted as you would have expected, because, where do you pick up the revenue from? The company says they're working to develop new revenue streams. We reported recently that one of the things they're looking to do is put up a paywall.
I was going to say pay for access. That's
exactly, but that would be for premium content, so that wouldn't be everyday stuff. Anyway, yeah, and of course they had that merger that failed with Stuff. They said that could have potentially helped the company. All of these things are going to be challenging for them going ahead. We'll see what happens with that. The market wasn't happy, though. The share price fell, more than 18% today. So that's chunky. That's a 12-cent drop to 53 cents. Now, compared with Trade Me, their share price ended up more than 16%. That's 83 cents to $5.93, which is still well below that offer price of $6.40. So we'll see what happens with that. Meanwhile, the NZX Top 50 Index was down more than 0.5% to 8,672. That's 48 points. Now, that's very much in line with what happened in Australia this afternoon and what we're seeing in Asia. Definitely, there's still those jitters around trade. There's global economic growth concerns now. We've seen the U.S. dollar, though, recover somewhat after a bit of a drop. So that saw our New Zealand dollar drop a little bit. We are trading at 68 U.S. cents, so that's about a half a cent down from where we were. 94 cents Australian, that's pretty steady, and 53.1 pence.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's Nona Peltier with your business update. A lawyer specialising in drink driving says banning repeat offenders from ever holding a licence again could breach natural justice. Gavin Hawthorne has a long list of driving convictions stretching back decades, including being responsible for 4 deaths while drunk at the wheel. But in June, he was caught drink driving again and was yesterday sentenced to 6 months home detention, 180 hours community work, and he was disqualified from driving for 2 years. Road safety groups say the punishment's too light. Alex Ashton reports.
The parole board says Gavin Morris Hawthorne has an extensive and serious criminal record, including driving offences which have resulted in the deaths of 4 people.
That report from Checkpoint 5 years ago. Gavin Hawthorne and his repeated drink driving convictions have been in and out of the news for 2 decades. In 1989, he crossed the centre line at high speed and hit an oncoming vehicle, killing 2 passengers in his car and the driver of the other car. Fast forward to 2003, Hawthorne killed again while driving drunk. This time, his passenger died when he crashed his car while driving home from a night in Wellington. The judge's notes from that conviction lay Hawthorne's offending bare.
In your hands, the car you were driving was a lethal weapon. It was as dangerous as a loaded gun. Your reckless, irresponsible and foolhardy driving made it so.
Spending over a decade in prison hasn't stopped Hawthorne from offending. Earlier this year, he was caught drink driving again, given 6 months home detention, 180 hours community work, and has also been disqualified from driving for 2 years. But the director of road safety charity Break, Caroline Perry, says that's not enough.
In cases where someone is a serious repeat offender, we want to see stronger sentences and also the option of a permanent loss of driving licence.
In New Zealand, repeat drink drivers can have their licences suspended indefinitely, but not permanently. Offenders can get their licences back after being assessed at a drug centre, appealing to the Transport Agency and then resitting their driving tests. Ms Perry wants that changed for people she says show no care for the lives of other drivers.
Someone is frequently putting other people's lives at risk and showing a disregard for the law, then why are they able to continue driving?
Steve Cullen's an Auckland-based lawyer who's worked with people facing drink driving charges for decades. Some of his clients have over a dozen convictions for drink driving. He says repeat offending is common, but he says removing licences for good with no chance of appeal could cause problems.
You wouldn't want that type of approach applied to somebody who's in their 20s or 30s, and in their 60s or 70s, that type of punishment is still applying with no prospect of appeal. It would probably be a breach of the Bill of Rights Act and a breach of rules of natural justice.
Mr Cullen says it's hard to stop recidivist offenders from making the choices they do.
By and large, unless we're continually incarcerating people and just keeping them locked up, it's very difficult to stop people from doing what they choose to do.
So what other options do judges have aside from disqualifying a licence or putting people in prison or home detention? Mr Cullen says programs focusing on treating the addiction and the use of interlock devices are at a judge's disposal too. But both he and Ms Perry agree the only way to stop some of the worst drink drivers from driving is through a prison sentence. Mō te otaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Alex Ashton tēnei.
And while we're on the topic of driving, a lot of you are getting in touch with us about our story earlier. Now, this is about Dargaville diesel specialists who have had their licence to issue warrant of fitnesses taken off them. This follows a crash where a passenger subsequently died. The seatbelt was frayed and broke in the crash. And the NZTA says the car should never have been given a warrant. They also acknowledged that they knew since 2011 that there were problems with this particular garage, but they didn't take, quote, decisive action. So, from our listeners, Dargaville diesel specialists in relation to this. So we've heard this person saying, Sue says, thank you for interviewing the man. She's talking about Rodney Wilson from that garage who issued the warrant of fitness. He shows he knows his field of expertise. Another texter says, my local VTNZ told my wife that they should fail her car's WAF for a frayed seatbelt. Minor, he says. They gave her a warrant of fitness though and suggested that she burn the bits off with a lighter. Thanks, JT. And Tony from South Taranaki says, I'm a retired vehicle safety inspector. 12 months is too long an interval between warrant of fitness inspections. Tyre wear is only one variable. And think again, LTNZ. He says. In relation to LTNZ, this person says their response is damage control, just covering their backsides. Thanks for your feedback. Do keep it coming. Turning now to pharmacies. Pharmacists have been told to restrict the number of paracetamol tablets that they're dishing out to people because of a nationwide shortage of the country's most dispensed medicine. About 1 million paracetamol tablets, yeah, you heard right, 1 million paracetamol tablets are dispensed every day, requiring 2 shipping containers to be imported every month. But stocks are running low and new supplies aren't expected until the new year. Catherine Hutton reports.
A month ago, the drug buying agency Pharmac wrote to the country's pharmacists, telling them to place restrictions on the way they dispense the drug. Pharmac's Director of Operations, Lisa Williams, says the shortage is due to issues at overseas manufacturing plants.
One of the manufacturers of the active pharmaceutical ingredient in the world had a fire which caused a problem at their factory with the production of the product. So that means that all finished product manufacturers of paracetamol have been finding difficulties getting access to the active ingredient.
Those restrictions mean patients who experience acute pain can receive up to 100 tablets at a time. That's about 12 days' worth. And those with chronic illnesses can get up to 240 tablets. That's about a month's supply. The restriction applies only to paracetamol bought on prescription. It is still possible to buy the drug off the shelf at a chemist or supermarket. Pharmacists like Melina Holmes in Whanganui says since the restrictions came into place, they've seen the amount of paracetamol they dispense drop by about 2/3. She says such restrictions impact both pharmacists and the public, including extra time talking to customers, calling doctors, etc.
Which means we have to do extra dispensings of those medicines, which is extra, time that it costs us in staffing, labelling, your vials and your boxes and everything. It also means it's an inconvenience to the customer. They have to come back on some medicines on a monthly basis when they used to just come in every 3 months for that particular medicine. And no one reimburses pharmacy or the customer for that inconvenience.
She says the issue with paracetamol tablets comes after restrictions on paracetamol liquid and ibuprofen tablets have just been lifted. Ms Holmes, who has been a pharmacist for 20 years, says it's part of a worrying trend, with the number of restrictions seemingly on the rise.
Even 5 years ago, if we had a shortage on a medicine, it was very rare, whereas now, like if you look at the last 6 months, it's becoming a little bit of a joke in terms of pharmacy, that you sort of go, oh, what's out of stock this week? Like, we actually have a whiteboard in our pharmacy and we write up all the out of stocks.
But Pharmac's Lisa Williams says while they are finding it more difficult to access drugs, which is part of a worldwide trend, it's rare for those shortages to impact on pharmacists or the public. She says because Pharmac tends to contract drugs through a single supplier, the country experiences fewer stock outages at a patient level than other countries. Pharmac has also begun funding an alternative, although it too is in limited supply. So will the country run out of paracetamol? Lisa Williams thinks that's unlikely.
There's lots of other pain management medicines that could be used. That would be what doctors would need to consider prescribing.
If those medicines are more expensive, Pharmac would be able to seek compensation from the supplier of paracetamol, although she says that's unlikely. For Checkpoint, Catherine Hutton.
An inquiry into the deadly SAS raid in Afghanistan in 2010 has been described as the most complex such process ever carried out in this country. The investigation was triggered by the book Hit and Run, which claims 6 civilians were killed and 15 injured in a raid on 2 Afghan villages by the elite New Zealand soldiers. The Defence Force says 1 insurgent was shot dead. The former Supreme Court Judge Sir Terence Arnold and former Prime Minister Sir Geoffrey Palmer are heading the inquiry into Operation Burnham, but a preliminary hearing is listening to arguments about how much of the evidence should be kept secret. Anne-Marie May reports.
Sir Terence Arnold told the hearing that decisions about the handling of classified material and witnesses will be fundamental to the success of the inquiry, and it was important today's hearing was conducted openly.
We thought it would be useful for there to be a public airing of the issues relevant to the decisions that the inquiry must make as to its processes, dealing with classified information and for conducting the inquiry, so as to assist in public understanding of the issues and what's at stake.
One of the country's most senior lawyers, Christy McDonald QC, is assisting the inquiry. She says when it comes to disclosing sensitive information, a do-no-harm principle should govern the process. She says the public will lose confidence if the inquiry doesn't protect national security and international relations, and there are risks in having an open hearing.
Witnesses such as whistleblowers are unlikely to come forward. Secondly, the accounts to be given by sensitive witnesses are far less likely to be candid and complete. The inquiry process will be significantly longer and will involve considerable added cost. The risks we have identified of inadvertent disclosure by classified information are not avoided.
Lawyer Deborah Manning, who is representing villages targeted in the raids, says it's essential the inquiry covered New Zealand's obligations regarding the Afghan nationals' right to life, as the International Security Assistance Force, or ISAF, had given them little help.
Lack of independence and transparency and failure to involve the next of kin. ISAF has had no contact with my clients. In fact, something that's common after these operations is little pieces of paper scattered with the equivalent of an 0800 number for people to telephone, and they tried to telephone that number the next day but no one answered.
Nikki Hager, one of the authors of Hit and Run, also urged the inquiry not to keep evidence secret. He says he's been handling classified material and making official information requests for 35 years, and organisations like the military frequently cite fear of security breaches as a reason for denying access to documents.
That perhaps that there were sensitive methods that would be exposed or staff that would be endangered, when in fact it was routine military information which is released all around the world. Or that alliance relationships would be in peril, when in fact I knew already that this was information that our allies routinely gave to their own citizens, and this guy didn't fall down and no one minded.
The preliminary hearing will continue tomorrow. For Checkpoint, Anne-Marie May.
The US President has issued an extraordinary statement of support for Saudi Arabia and its Crown Prince over the murder of the journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Donald Trump claims there is nothing definitive linking the Crown Prince to Mr Khashoggi's killing at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul last month. The statement appears to be a presidential act of defiance. It goes against the Senate, which is considering legislation that would suspend weapons sales to Saudi Arabia, along with other punitive measures. Here's the BBC's Chris Buckler.
The CIA now believes it has a detailed picture of what happened when Jamal Khashoggi entered the Saudi consulate. The names of the so-called Saudi execution team who flew into Istanbul to carry out the murder, and an audio recording of the killing inside the consulate, which President Trump says he has refused to listen to, because it was, in his words, so violent, vicious and terrible. It's been claimed that the intelligence agency believes that despite his denials, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman ordered the murder. Today, in a statement, President Trump seemed to simply dismiss that, saying our intelligence agencies continue to assess all information. But it could very well be that the Crown Prince had knowledge of this tragic event. Maybe he did, and maybe he didn't.
I'm not going to destroy the world economy, and I'm not going to destroy the economy for our country by being foolish with Saudi Arabia.
What many people will find shocking is that in this statement, President Trump at one stage refers to the fact that some in Saudi Arabia regarded Jamal Khashoggi as an enemy of the state. He does go on to say that this was a terrible and indefensible crime. But nonetheless, it gives you the sense that President Trump intends to put American interests first over global concerns.
The United States will continue to have a relationship with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They're an important partner of ours. We will do that with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, its people. That is the commitment that the President made today.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Today, President Trump was taking part in a presidential tradition, pardoning a turkey before Thanksgiving. But away from the cameras, critics say he has been making excuses for Saudi Arabia, granting the country something approaching forgiveness. The Washington Post, which employed Jamal Khashoggi as a columnist, said President Trump's response was a betrayal of American values and that surrendering to what they called a state-ordered murder only made this world more dangerous.
And that was Chris Buckler reporting from Washington. A dead sperm whale that washed up off the coast of Indonesia had more than 6 kilograms of plastic caught up in its stomach. The 30-foot whale was found in waters near Kapoto Island in the Wakatobi National Park late yesterday afternoon. The area is renowned for its pristine waters and wildlife, but as millions of tonnes of plastic pours into our oceans every year, marine scientists and conservationists say that there is nowhere that is safe from pollution, including New Zealand. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Munro filed this report.
Plastic is poisoning our oceans, and nowhere is it more visible than in the guts of this dead whale. A total of 115 plastic cups, 2 jandals, 4 plastic bottles, 25 plastic bags, collectively weighing nearly 6 kilograms, were pulled from its beached body. Marine scientists in Indonesia weren't able to determine the cause of death, but say the plastic they saw was truly awful. Unfortunately, it's not the first whale to have died with its stomach choked with plastic. In June, a pilot whale died off southern Thailand after swallowing 80 plastic bags. Indonesia, China, Vietnam, Thailand and the Philippines are reported to account for more than half of the plastic waste that ends up in oceans. But the plastic problem isn't limited to Southeast Asia. New Zealand's wildlife is also struggling to cope.
So these are 2 pots that are full of plastic, which were found in one animal, in one hawksbill turtle.
Ann Pass is a vet at Auckland Zoo. She says plastic here has filled the insides of turtles and wrapped itself around seals.
So we have seen several sea turtles that came in with smaller amounts of plastic, and we had one hawksbill turtle that came in with a lot of plastic that it had ingested and actually obstructed its intestine.
She says it's not a nice way to go.
It sits all in their intestine. They can't digest their food properly anymore. They don't eat like other good food, that what they need, so they will become weak, and then they might just starve, or they might just get other infections. So that's what we're already seeing, yeah.
It only took me a couple of minutes to pick up a dozen or so pieces of plastic off this Auckland beach. We've got cutlery, stirrers, bottle tops, polystyrene, wrappers. It's all of this plastic that flows out into the ocean and into our marine life. Scientists estimate that if we keep things up at our current rate, by 2050 there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Sam Judd is the co-founder of the charity Sustainable Coastlines. He says plastic is a problem for every country.
Well, we just saw the seagull here picking at what looks like a battery case off a car. It's just amazing that just today we're here filming, talking about the issue, and we see wildlife biting at plastic.
He says stopping plastic at its source is the only way we're going to keep it out of our oceans.
Absolutely. We really need to look at how much plastic we are consuming on a personal level, and in particular, single-use plastics. Whether it's recyclable or not isn't the issue. The issue is we're consuming products with plastic packaging that is only being used once. more than 75% of what we collect off the coastlines is single-use plastic.
It's estimated that 8 to 10 million tonnes of plastic is pouring into the ocean every year. With no sign of that letting up, Sam Judd says it's just a matter of time before whales in New Zealand waters are choking on it too. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Nita Blake Person, aho.
And if you're listening on radio, that one's worth going back and having a look at Nita and Nick's piece there. It's fascinating what they found inside that whale. Keep your feedback coming, particularly on the issue of WAFs. This is the Northland garage that's had its licence to issue warrant of fitnesses suspended after one car, it rubber stamped, was involved in an accident and the seat belt failed. The accident turned out to be fatal. NZTA has taken their licence off them, but NZTA also knew there were problems way back from 2011. So you can tweet us on at Checkpoint RNZ or text us.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, ko Susana Leia tawa tēnei. The Transport Agency has admitted it knew a Northland mechanic was issuing warrants of fitness without doing critical checks, such as seatbelt inspection. Just weeks later, a passenger in a car checked by Dargaville diesel specialists died in a crash when his frayed seatbelt failed. The agency's chief executive Fergus Gammy says inspectors had known since 2011 there were serious problems with the firm's warrants, but took a far too lenient approach, including during a visit late last year.
In that visit, we identified that actually they weren't issuing warrants correctly, that there were things that they weren't doing, such as our people did observe them issuing a warrant without checking the seatbelt.
Fergus Gammy says he has visited the family of the 65-year-old man killed in the crash and apologised for the agency's role in the tragedy. However, the owner of Dargaville Diesel Specialists, Rodney Wilson, told Checkpoint he's not to blame for what happened.
A warrant of fitness only represents that the car is fit to be issued a warrant on the day of inspection. After that, who knows?
Rodney Wilson. The Transport Agency says the owners of almost 2,000 vehicles in Northland have been told to get them rechecked. The co-author of a book accusing the Defence Force of covering up civilian deaths during an SAS mission in Afghanistan has urged an inquiry to be open with information. The Operation Burnham inquiry held a preliminary hearing today to discuss how it handles classified material. Nikki Hager, whose book Hit and Run led to the inquiry, has told the hearing the official Defence Force narrative of what happened in Baghlan province left out many details, including the death of a child and other civilians.
And the lack of giving medical and other aid, and the cover-up, which I see the narrative as part of. My point here is that NZDF is extremely reluctant to admit that anything went wrong, and I believe only a very rigorous process will get beyond their denials.
Nikki Hager said the Defence Force should not be able to pick and choose which information to share publicly and which to restrict. A former colleague of a bogus psychiatrist who claimed to have qualified in New Zealand says she was trawling the internet and other doctors' case notes for clues to treating patients. Zolia Alemi worked for more than 22 years in Britain as a consultant psychiatrist in both the National Health Service and private practice. It's now emerged, however, that she was not qualified, having dropped out of Auckland University's medical school in her first year. Claire Wilkinson, who worked as Alemi's secretary at a private clinic, told Checkpoint Alemi got secretaries and other staff to write out prescriptions that she would sign off. She says Alemi seemed to search other consultants' case files for guidance and spent some time reviewing treatments online. Middlemore Hospital says it's done well from a government funding boost despite getting a lot less than nearby DHBs. $80 million is being put into 4 projects at the South Auckland Hospital and the Manukau Super Clinic. Auckland Hospital got more than 3 times that amount and North Shore $200 million. The chair of the county's Manukau DHB, Vui Mark Goshi, says this does not reflect a failure to lobby hard enough.
We've worked together across the 4 Northern Region DHBs, so look at this as a package for the whole region because we shift people across boundaries. Whatever's spent in the region helps the whole lot of us.
Mark Goshi of the county's Manukau DHB. The Privacy Commissioner says he has had to shake up his office environment following a period of high staff turnover and unpleasant internal feedback. Appearing before a parliamentary committee today for the Commission's annual review, John Edwards was asked by MPs why he is constantly recruiting. He said there are several factors, including not being able to afford to pay staff enough and rising global demand for people with skills in the area of privacy. But Mr Edwards said he has taken on board some rough feedback from engagement surveys and exit interviews and made some changes.
I now am confident that I have a more current and contemporary finger on the pulse of the culture of the organisation, and I can represent to you that we have a safe and supportive workplace that really does nurture the talent that we have and recognises the contribution that those staff make.
The Privacy Commissioner John Edwards. Israel and Poland have become the latest countries to reject the United Nations Global Pact on Migration, set to be adopted next month. They join Austria, Hungary and the Czech Republic, which withdrew support, and the United States, which never agreed to the text in the first place. The BBC's Adam Easton explains Poland's rejection.
The Polish government said the agreement does not guarantee that nations will have the sovereign right to decide which people to accept in their territories, adding that the pact fails to make an adequate distinction between legal and illegal migrants. Warsaw said its priorities were keeping control over migration flows and ensuring the security of its citizens.
Adam Easton in Warsaw. It's 6:05. To sport, and the Canadian tennis player Eugenie Bouchard is the latest big name to be added to the field for this summer's ASB Classic Women's Tournament in Auckland. Bouchard was a Wimbledon finalist in 2014 and reached her career high ranking of 5 the same year. The 24-year-old has since slipped to 88th but is upbeat about her future following some strong results on this year's tour. The field contains 3 former world number ones, 3 Grand Slam champions, the defending champion and an Olympic gold medalist. Director Carl Budge rates it the strongest lineup the tournament's ever had. Chocolate milkshakes have powered a 64-year-old Napier man to a new national record in running the length of the country. This afternoon, Perry Newburn arrived in Bluff, breaking a record for the 2,100 kilometre journey that has stood for 43 years. Newburn left Cape Reinga on November the 3rd and reached Bluff 18 days, 8 hours and 42 minutes later, beating the previous time by just 19 minutes. He says he was quite emotional crossing the finish line.
Almost a blubbering mess. But yeah, you hold everything together to do that for the whole time of the run. And at the end, everything's just going to let loose a bit, and you've just got to let it go.
Perry Newburn says he'll take a few days to head home to Napier, and when he gets there, he's going for a run. That's the news.
Who's making the cut?
Some midwives are doing it, but I would argue that as it's a surgical procedure, it should be done by a surgeon. And I understand there are also some dentists who do it.
Who's being moved on?
Not every homeless person is a beggar, and not every beggar is a homeless person, and just shifting people down the road further marginalise them.
And who's benefiting?
If I thought about where we might spend $2.8 billion, this is not the area where it's needed most.
Fees-free radio, weekdays on Morning Report with Susie Ferguson and Guy Aspinall. Then on 9 to noon, is the nuclearisation of North Korea getting closer? We talk to the UN watchdog on nuclear testing. And after 10, crime writer Linda LaPlante on the new Hollywood blockbuster based on her book, Widows. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Waitomo, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Showers, heavy and thundery with hail, clearing most places tomorrow. However, the odd afternoon and evening shower remaining south of Auckland. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few showers especially about the ranges, possible thunderstorms and hail. Taranaki to Wellington, including Wairarapa, showers and isolated thunderstorms, heavy with possible hail especially about the ranges, clearing everywhere tomorrow apart from Wellington and Wairarapa. Marlborough, Nelson, Buller, Northern Westland, a few showers inland, some heavy and thundery with hail today, otherwise fine. The odd shower developing about Marlborough tomorrow. For the remainder of Westland and Fiordland, isolated afternoon and evening showers about the ranges, otherwise fine. Canterbury, occasional showers mainly south of Christchurch. Otago and Southland, rain with some heavy falls today, gradually clearing tomorrow. Chatham Islands, showers today, fine spells tomorrow. It's 5:08. You're with Checkpoint.
And I'm Lisa Owen, and we'll update you further on the weather down in Dunedin and the rest of the country. Spoiler, it's not good. Middlemore Hospital's leaky and rotting buildings will be given an $80 million facelift, something the government says has been needed but neglected for years. The Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern, and Health Minister David Clark announced the funding boost at the South Auckland Hospital this morning. Eva Corlett filed this report.
It was the first time the Prime Minister had visited the hospital during her leadership. She was welcomed with a pōwhiri and joined by official representatives from both government and the county's Manukau DHB. Hospital staff filmed from their phones as Ms Ardern made the announcement.
We are here to share that we will be investing more than $80 million in 4 projects at Middlemore and the Manukau Super Clinic site.
Ms Ardern says improving the state of hospitals is a government priority after what she describes as years of neglect and underinvestment during the previous government. The money will go towards upgrading leaky buildings and earthquake-prone facilities at both Manukau Super Clinic and Middlemore Hospital and resolving issues with rot and mould.
I see this health and well-being, our physical and mental health, at being at the centre of what we need to do as a government. And we can't deliver that without the bricks and mortar being in good shape. It detracts from the job that you do. It makes it harder if you don't have the facilities that you need and the infrastructure that you need.
She spoke highly of the work done by hospital staff despite the state of their facilities. The Health Minister, David Clark, says 4 main projects will also benefit. Those include recladding the Kids First building, relocating the radiology department and establishing a radiology hub and upgrading services at the Super Clinic.
These projects will significantly improve the standard of key facilities. They will also help position County's Manukau DHB to better handle a growing population with complex needs.
Mr Clark says the project will require careful planning to minimise disruption to staff and patients. Some of the funding will go towards assessment costs. Neither Mr Clark nor Ms Ardern could confirm exactly how much, but they say a substantial amount will go towards actual fix-up costs. County's Manukau DHB has previously estimated that remediating Middlemore's problems would cost about $1.6 billion. The coalition government has also pumped money into other Auckland hospitals' infrastructure. Auckland Hospital has received over 3 times what Middlemore is getting, and North Shore $200 million. But the chair of the county's Manukau DHB, Vui Mark Goshi, isn't bitter.
We've worked together across the 4 Northern Region DHBs, so look at this as a package for the whole region because we shift people across boundaries. Whatever's spent in the region helps the whole lot of us.
Andy Hipkiss from the nurses' organisation says $80 million is a small step on a long road. He says the hospital has been deteriorating for years and needs significant investment, but that staff and patients will benefit from this.
You can't put poorly children and the nurses that look after them in a mouldy building where they're potentially going to pick up more diseases, more infections. It has to be clean, it has to be safe, and it has to be absolutely fit for purpose.
The government is uncertain how long it will take before the upgrade is complete, but Mr Hipkiss is urging it to get repairs underway as soon as possible. Mr Clark says Treasury estimates around $14 billion will need to be spent upgrading medical facilities around the country over the next 10 years. I tāmaki mokoro mō te Otago Southland, ko Eva Corlett tēnei.
Part of Dunedin and Otago were today in clean-up mode after 150 millimetres of rain fell in just 48 hours. The deluge pushed the Clutha River to its highest level in nearly 20 years, with flooding closing roads and inundating farms. But while the rain looks to be easing, it might be short-lived with more bad weather due this weekend. I spoke to Met Service meteorologist Georgina Griffiths a short time ago and asked her what was in store for the sodden south.
We have another burst of rain coming in from about now for the next 12 hours, and this isn't as bad rainfall intensity-wise or rainfall total-wise as we saw in the last day and a half, but because the region is already super saturated and the river is very high. We're keeping a very close eye monitoring eastern Otago and, of course, liaising with the regional council and hydrologists down there.
Georgina, what are the worst hit areas?
Oh, I mean, this rain is just starting, and as I mentioned, it's not so intense. I mean, much of the upper North Island has seen considerable thunderstorm activity as well, locally heavy rain, water spouts, copious amounts of hail in the last 2 days. It's almost a repeat day today as yesterday with that short, sharp, heavy rain, and it's cold nationally. So this has been a really impactful complex low. The good news for Otago, Eastern Otago, one of the areas that, of course, has seen the most rainfall in southern Canterbury, is that this is nearly over. About 2 a.m, the rainfall to watch criteria should ease back, and the rain clears during tomorrow. Most of the country actually improves during Thursday, Lisa, so that's really good news.
So has it stuck around a bit longer than you thought it would?
No, we've had several rain bands come in and they've all done their thing, and then there's been a brief break in between down there in the southeast South Island. Models have been very good with this event, actually.
So how unusual is this type of weather at this time of year?
Well, every few years you see it. It's not normal, but, we've had low snow in November before. I think we've seen a bit of commentary around that the last few days. We've had heavy rain in the eastern South Island right through summer. In fact, you can get it. So it is late for spring, but, good old New Zealand weather. We've got pedigree for having horrible cold and heavy rain and floods at any time of the year, really. So not common, but not that rare either.
So when is summer arriving, Georgina?
Well, heads up, we have a bit of a reprieve on Friday. As I mentioned, we improve tomorrow, and Friday looks pretty good for most of the country. Just watch that low cloud along the eastern South Island. But, major weather events are coming in, Lisa, this weekend for the country. And it starts with rain risk heavy in the North Island during the weekend. Most people will see some rain at some point in the weekend, and it could be heavy in a slot between Taranaki and Bay of Plenty during the weekend. The unfortunate news is that we're actually looking at a repeat easterly rain event coming down through the eastern North Island sometime during Sunday and into the eastern South Island once again Sunday into Monday. So it's not all over for eastern areas for heavy rain in the far south. So just a heads up, Met Services watching that Sunday into Monday rain again for those already super saturated eastern South Island areas.
That is totally depressing, Georgina.
Yeah, yes, well, we do try and it would be nice to see a bit of summer at some point, but not in the short term, no.
And the man accused of murdering Arishma Chand has told a jury he held the South Auckland mother as she lay dying but didn't murder her. Rohit Deepak Singh has pleaded not guilty to stabbing Ms Chand to death in her Manurewa home in November last year. Annika Smith is at his trial at the High Court in Auckland.
In the trial's fourth week, the defence opened its case and called its first witness, Rohit Singh. His defence lawyer, Belinda Sellers, walked him through a series of events leading up to Miss Chand's death. And when it came to recounting what Singh says happened the night she died, the 42-year-old held his head in his hands and cried. His story is that he and Miss Chand were secretly seeing one another when she was killed. He said the pair resumed their relationship after breaking up and agreed to spend time together the night she died. That night, he parked up outside her home and waited for her boyfriend to leave before approaching the house. Mr Singh told the jury the front door was open and he called Miss Chand's name but didn't hear a reply. As he entered the house, he found her lying on the floor, wounded and semi-conscious. He told the jury what happened next through an interpreter who translated his words from the Fiji Hindi language.
I knelt on my knee and I tried to wake her up. Both my hands were behind her shoulder. I did not shift her. I lifted her up to the level and I shook her. When she got up, she did not recognize me and she tried to attack me.
Mr Singh said Miss Chand clawed at him, scratching his face, and told him to leave.
Her mind was stuck in one place. All she wanted me to do was leave the house, get away from there. And I said, no, I won't leave and go. She told me, she said, you go, that I have called my papa and papa will take me to the hospital.
He said he left the house in shock and went straight home. He showered and changed before putting his bloodied clothes and shoes in a plastic bag and throwing it in hot mix asphalt. Mr Singh said he wanted to phone and see how Miss Chand was, but knew she didn't want him to contact her father. He then drove to the North Shore to see his auntie and uncle, where he said he was robbed by a group of women who stole his watch. His defence lawyer asked Mr Singh why he told the police he hadn't seen Arishma Chand.
Because I knew that day I have seen Arishma, and if I would have told them straight away, they wouldn't have listened to me like my story or something, and they could have like just put me in the cell. So yeah, actually it was my first time and like I didn't know what to do.
The Crown's case is that Rohit Singh was an obsessed ex-boyfriend whose infatuation with Miss Chand drove him to kill her. The pair had been in a brief sexual relationship in 2016. Miss Chand fell pregnant but broke up with Mr Singh and got an abortion. The Crown alleges Mr Singh was jealous, and his jealousy grew when she began a new relationship. Belinda Sellers put this to her client.
Did you know that Arishma was planning to marry Inderpreet Singh?
No.
Were you jealous of Arishma?
No.
Did you kill Arishma?
No.
The trial is expected to finish next week. Ātuiti ko te mātua ko Annika Smith-Aho.
More companies have pulled out of next year's Auckland Pride Parade over the controversial ban on police in uniforms. Banks and business groups are among the sponsors and participants dropping their support. 2 Pride board members have also quit, but the head of the board isn't backing down. Amy Williams reports.
Vodafone has pulled its funding, and its LGBTQI workers say they won't take part in the parade unless the Pride Board changes its mind. They say they cannot participate in an event that applies different rules for different groups and seems to be acting contrary to its kaupapa. Darren Mendonça is chair of the Vodafone's Rainbow Whānau.
Ultimately, we believe that we should walk the value of inclusion, in which case, in this case, it's not walking at all if the police were not allowed to wear uniforms at the parade.
BNZ also withdrew today following Westpac, Ponsonby Business Association and the Rainbow New Zealand Trust. In a statement, the bank said its Pride at BNZ network decided it won't go to the Auckland Parade. But like Vodafone, it will be participating in the festival in other ways. And it plans to go to the Wellington Pride Parade in March. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says she's not sure what her plans are for the event because she hasn't seen her schedule. She won't comment on the stoush that has caused a bitter divide in the rainbow community.
Look, I see these as being issues directly for those who are organising the festival and events and the parade itself, and those who are contributing floats and marching inside, rather than a matter for me.
When she was asked if the loss of corporate funding would hurt the parade, the board chair, Sissy Rock, says it's not about the money, but celebrating with the community.
One of the biggest criticisms we got was that Pride's too corporate. So I don't think that Pride is reliant on corporate sponsorship. Pride's reliant on a community that really wants to get behind it and be visible and be queer.
Ms Rock says the spat has been blown out of proportion.
This isn't a revolution. This is just a very small little thing that we're asking. Hey, if we care about everyone in our community, what is it that we can do to make Pride a place that really, truly is inclusive and allows everyone to be visible?
And she won't back down on the decision to ban police in uniforms.
It's hard to give the LGBTI stamp of approval to an institution that is still homophobic, transphobic, racist, violent, and that's why this very small concession of not wearing the uniform is seen as a way forward, something that would allow everyone to participate.
Other sponsors have told RNZ they are waiting for the outcome of further discussions by the board. It will hold a special meeting early next month. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
It is 23 after 6. At least 50 people have been killed in a suicide bomb attack on a gathering of religious scholars in the Afghan capital of Kabul. The bomber snuck into a wedding hall where hundreds of religious scholars and clerics had gathered to mark the birthday of the Prophet Muhammad. Here's the ABC's Middle East correspondent Alexandra Fisher.
As emergency services rushed to the scene of the suicide bombing in the Afghan capital Kabul and police sealed off roads leading to the scene, the death toll continued to rise. Rahula Ganik-Hale witnessed the attack.
I wanted to enter the hotel to participate in the ceremony, but I got a call from a relative and he told me that there was a blast inside the hotel and that his children were wounded. Now I'm looking after my friends who have also been wounded by the blast. But the hospitals won't allow anyone to go in.
The bomber had sneaked into a wedding hall where hundreds of religious scholars and clerics had gathered to mark the birthday of Islam's prophet Muhammad. Police say they weren't asked to provide security for the event and that the bomber had easily slipped into the hall. Here's Afghan Health Ministry spokesman Wahid Majro.
Based on the recent reports we have received from different hospitals and Kabul ambulance system, the explosion happened in the Uranus Hall has resulted in 83 people which are injured and about 50 other are killed in this explosion.
Mohammed Muzamil was a waiter at the wedding hall.
We went out to bring water for guests, and while I was walking down the stairs, we heard the sound of an explosion from inside the hall. After we entered the hall, everywhere was covered with smoke and dust. There were dead bodies all around, on the chairs, in large numbers.
Hundreds of family members and relatives gathered at local hospitals, looking at lists of those killed and wounded that were posted outside. Ahmad Fahim was among the injured and spoke from his hospital bed.
I heard the explosion. I just managed to take my cousin out of there, who is seriously wounded. But when I got here, I realised that I was wounded as well, and I am here.
Both the Taliban and a local Islamic State affiliate have targeted religious scholars aligned with the government in the past. It's one of the deadliest attacks in Kabul in recent months. President Ashraf Ghani has declared a day of national mourning, with the flag to be flown at half-mast. The UN mission in Afghanistan said it was outraged by the bombing. In a tweet, it wrote, "The UN family extends deepest condolences to the families affected."
Alexandra Fisher reporting there. Chocolate milkshakes have powered 64-year-old Napier man Perry Newburn to a new national record for running the length of the country. This afternoon he reached Bluff, breaking Ziggy Bauer's 43-year record for the 2,100-kilometre journey. Unbelievable. Newburn left Cape Reinga in the early hours of November the 3rd and crossed the line in Bluff 18 days, 8 hours and 42 minutes later, just 19 minutes quicker than Bauer. The run helped raise funds for Autism Support Group and Running on the Spectrum. Perry Newburn told sports editor Stephen Hewson he was never certain he'd beat Bauer's mark.
Never. It was always within reach, I think. I never let it get too far out of reach, but something like that is till you actually cross the line and look at the time, that's when you know it's you've got it.
And what was it when you crossed the finish line? What were your first thoughts?
let's put almost a blubbering mess. But yeah, you hold everything together to do that for the whole time of the run. And at the end, everything's just going to let loose a bit, and you've just got to let it go.
Did you have to run through the night often to keep on schedule?
Probably a couple of times we did. We knew we'd have to run through the night near the end. We'd initially set it for the night before, but with that weather bomb, it was just impossible out there after running through it all day long. The incredible thing was I had about a number of people who came out and spent long periods of time with me in that weather, and the part between Clinton and Matara, going up some of those hills and along the top, the wind, it was ferocious. There's once I did have to get into the van and the car for a wee while because the wind was just almost blowing me over. So yeah, there's parts where it could have quite dangerous.
And what, chocolate milkshakes got you through a fair bit of it, I understand?
Oh, love those chocolate milkshakes. milkshakes. They're lovely. It's, well, I think they are. They give me the sense of being full. They're nice. They're great.
Oh, and boy, does he deserve a few of those. Perry Newburn's achievement goes along with his record of running across the United States in 51 days. What an overachiever. And he says he'll take a few days to head back up to his home in Napier, but won't be running home. Time now for some of your feedback on the subject of warrant of fitnesses. This is a story we have about a Dargaville garage losing its licence to issue warrant of fitnesses. Julie from the Kapiti Coast says, my WOF noted that the disc pads and right front tyre would not last until the next WOF 1 year on, but no advice was given regarding when, etc. Obviously left up to me to know, she says, but how do I know when disc pads need doing? Good point. And overwhelmingly, the feedback from you all about that particular story is you don't think the WOF system is working 100%. Also, in the area of driving, recidivist drunk driver Gary Hawthorne, this is the guy who's been sentenced to home detention and community work, and he's been bouncing back to the courts many times. He is responsible for 4 deaths. Cody says recidivist drunk drivers should absolutely have their licences confiscated. If they're proven time and time again that they can't act responsibly with it, they should not be able to put others at risks. And finally, the whale with the stomach full of plastic, cups that is. The death of this whale is unforgivable, says this texter. If only people could realise that small efforts could make a huge difference. Take your shopping bags to the supermarket, don't buy bottled water, get rid of the straws and plastic cutlery if you want your grandchildren to see whales. Have a great night.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Transport Agency admits it knew a Northland mechanic wasn't checking seatbelts before the death of a passenger in a car given a warrant of fitness by Dargaville diesel specialists. The co-author of a book accusing the Defence Force of covering up civilian deaths in Afghanistan is urging the Operation Burnham inquiry to be open with information. A former colleague of a bogus psychiatrist who claimed New Zealand qualifications says she trawled the internet and other doctors' case notes for clues to treating patients. The police in Wellington have discovered what they believe is the body of a missing pregnant woman at a beach in Wairarapa. Our next news and weather is at 7.
This week on Are We There Yet?
I have noticed that it has gone back to boys going, "Ooh, I don't want pink goggles."
How do we approach the issue of gender with our children?
We call